They threw her out of the church with her baby in her arms until a millionaire knelt beside her, and the rain fell with cruel slowness, as if the sky were crying for something it couldn't even name. It was 8 in the morning, and the steps of St. Augustine Church were getting wet in silence, one by one, with no one stepping on them, until she arrived. Emma, barefoot, with a baby wrapped in a worn blanket against her chest, she climbed those steps trembling like a leaf the wind refuses to take. She had no umbrella, no destination. She only had that child in her arms, and a faith as worn as her shoes, which had been abandoned hours earlier when they broke completely. She entered the temple without looking at anyone. The bells hadn't rung yet, and the incense was just beginning to fill the air. She sat in the second-to-last row, in silence, without kneeling or crossing herself. She wasn't there for God. She was there for shelter. For minutes, or were they seconds, she closed her eyes. She cradled her son tenderly, murmuring words no one else could hear. Her chest ached. She didn't know if from hunger, cold, or fear, maybe all three together. But it wasn't long before a shadow approached. Father Benedict, an older man, stone-faced with a perfectly pressed cassock. His voice wasn't harsh, but it carried a sentence, "Miss, you can't sleep here." She looked up, without a trace of pleading, only confusion. "I'm not sleeping. I'm just nursing him. This isn't the place for that. People come here to pray." Several faces turned, elderly women with rosaries, a couple of young volunteers distributing blessed bread, a woman with an enormous Bible who twisted her mouth in disgust. The priest didn't argue further. He simply pointed to the door. "Please." Emma lowered her gaze. She stood up. She held her baby tighter than ever and walked slowly to the exit. As she stepped on the first step, her bare foot slipped a little, but she didn't fall. She held herself with a dignity that was painful to watch. She sat there, outside the temple, under the persistent rain, soaking her skirt, her hair, her soul. No one helped her. No one looked at her, at least not from close by, because a few meters away, inside a black car with dark windows, someone was watching her, without moving, without blinking, as if in that silent image he had found something he'd been searching for years without knowing it. Before continuing, if this story has already touched a part of you, subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss the next stories that might also reach straight to your soul. And while Emma holds her son tightly on those cold steps, not knowing what to do, what's about to happen, will change not only her life, but also that of someone who never thought he'd believe in anyone again. The cold didn't feel the same on the street as it did in the soul, because there's a type of trembling that doesn't come from the weather, but from abandonment. And that, Emma knew very well. Sitting on the steps of that church, with her son sleeping on her chest, a fragile sleep as if the world could wake him with a whisper, her gaze wasn't in the present. It was back there, in that house where her mother closed the door on her when she learned she was pregnant. A disgrace, she had said. Not a question, not a hug, just the disgrace. And then, silence. The baby's father had disappeared in the 3rd month. He changed his number, changed neighborhoods, not a visit, not a message. He had left her with a growing belly and dwindling hope. Emma tried to work as long as she could, at a cafe with double shifts, then as an assistant in a bakery where the smell of warm bread was the only warm thing in her days. She remembered the kind gesture of old Robert, the baker, who once gave her half a baguette wrapped in a napkin. "You eat first, girl," he told her, seeing her stagger. But a few days later, the shop owner found out and fired her. "We can't have a pregnant woman as the face of the business," they told her. She spent the last 2 months of pregnancy in a makeshift shelter, sharing a mattress with other women forgotten by the system and their families. That's where her son was born. Between borrowed sheets, pain and tears, without applause or photos, only with the animal strength of maternal love pushing life into the world. She looked at him sleeping on her chest now, so small, so hers. She caressed his forehead. "I have nothing, my love," she whispered, "but I have you, and that has to be enough." The rain kept falling. Some people passed in front of the church and looked at her sideways with pity, with discomfort. Others simply didn't see her, as if she were part of the urban landscape, another ornament among the concrete and puddles. But one gaze remained fixed, that of the man inside the black car whose engine was still running, though the driver had no intention of moving. Not yet. There was something in that scene that squeezed his chest. a kind of distant echo, as if he recognized in that woman a forgotten version of himself. But he didn't believe in miracles, nor in redemption, and yet, he couldn't look away. From the back seat of a dark automobile, with tinted windows and impeccable leather, Gabriel observed the scene as if it were part of a movie he didn't know how it would end. But this wasn't fiction, and that knot he felt in his stomach didn't come from any script. It was real. He didn't know her name, nor her story, but the image was so powerful it immobilized him. A young woman, soaked, sitting on the steps of a church with a sleeping baby in her arms, bare feet, distant gaze. She wasn't asking for anything, she wasn't crying, she wasn't screaming, she was just resisting, and precisely that was what hit him in the chest. Gabriel was 42 years old, owner of several companies, properties, stocks, luxuries. He had attended galas where millions were donated to noble causes, but he had never seen a scene as powerful as that one, because that wasn't charity, it was pure dignity, despite defeat. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He could stay inside the car, he could give an order, he could leave, and yet, something inside him was screaming, something else, something he hadn't heard in years, since before losing his wife, since before the scandal, the silence, the voluntary isolation. Because Gabriel hadn't always been this silent and armored man. There was a time when he believed in redemption, in second chances, but that time seemed buried, until today. The driver, a discreet and professional man, broke the silence with a timid question. "Shall we go, Mr. Gabriel?" Gabriel didn't respond. He just raised his hand calmly, signaling to wait. He kept watching her, the way she held the baby, even without strength. The way she didn't collapse in the face of rejection. It seemed unfair to him, indecent, painful. Where were all those who spoke of compassion? Where was the church when it was really needed? He felt a stab of anger, and also sadness. Have you ever seen an injustice so raw, that you felt your chest tighten, even though it wasn't happening to you? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes, sharing it is the first step to changing something. Gabriel looked down. He thought of his wife, how she, if she was still alive, would have gotten out of the car without hesitation. She wouldn't have been able to bear seeing that. And in that thought, something changed. Gabriel took a deep breath, and put his hand on the door handle. Because although he didn't know it yet, that scene was about to transform into the crack through which a new beginning would enter. The sound of the door opening wasn't loud, but in the middle of that grey morning, it seemed like a crack in the air. Gabriel got out of the car. He wore a long black, elegant coat, Italian shoes, and a look that was no longer that of the unreachable businessman. It was different, a mixture of doubt, impulse, and something deeper, as if each step he took was against everything he had learned to repress. The rain kept falling with an almost symbolic stubbornness. He crossed the street slowly. Cars swerved around him. Some pedestrians stopped, bewildered. Wasn't that Gabriel Morrison, the one from the magazine covers, the one from the scandals? Yes, it was him. And yet, in that moment, he didn't seem like a millionaire, nor a public figure. He seemed human. Emma didn't notice him at first. She had her head down, humming a soft melody in her son's ear, trying to ignore the world, but she felt the footsteps. She felt the shadow, and she looked up with fear. She saw him, a stranger, soaked, who stopped right in front of her. Gabriel looked at her. He said nothing. He just looked down, and then he did it. He knelt on the wet cement, with his knee pressing into the puddle, as if that were the only right place to be in that moment. He didn't ask permission. He didn't offer empty words. He was just there, at her level, by her side, in silence. Emma frowned. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Gabriel looked at her directly. His eyes didn't hold pity. They held respect. "I just came to say that you're not alone," he said in a low, almost broken voice, "and that you shouldn't be here." Behind them, the church door opened again. An older woman came out with an umbrella, closed it when she saw the scene, and stepped back with a frown. Others began to murmur. Some were recording, but none of that mattered, because in that moment, frozen in time, under the grey sky and the murmur of the city, one truth became irrefutable. Emma's dignity had been recognized by someone who didn't know her, and not out of compassion, but out of conviction. She looked down. The baby was still sleeping. Gabriel was still on his knees. And for the first time in a long time, Emma didn't feel fear. She felt something else. Strange, disturbing, hope. The silence between them lasted longer than any witness could bear. The rain had eased, but the air was still humid, as if everything was breathing slower. Gabriel was still there, on his knees, without moving, with soaked pants and a quiet gaze. He didn't seem uncomfortable. He didn't seem fake. Emma, on the contrary, didn't know how to react. And who was this man? Why was he kneeling in front of her as if she were the one with power? "I don't need charity," she finally said, with a firm voice. Gabriel nodded. "I didn't come to give you that." She looked down at her baby. The child was still sleeping, oblivious to everything. Emma covered him a little more with the blanket. "I don't have anything to offer you either, sir. No time, no beauty, no pretty story. I'm not asking for anything," he replied. "Just a moment for you to come with me, eat, get dry, and decide." "Decide what?" Gabriel stood up slowly, like someone who doesn't want to break something sacred. He took a linen handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her, without touching her. She didn't take it. "It seems you have nowhere to go," he added, with a serene voice. "I have a place, that's all. No conditions, no commitments, just a roof for one day." Emma pressed her lips together. She was hungry, she was cold, and she was afraid, more afraid of saying yes than of saying no. "I've heard that before," she murmured. "There's always a price afterward." Gabriel put away the handkerchief, without being bothered. "I know, and why me?" she insisted. "Why today? Why do you care?" Gabriel's gaze wavered. For an instant his eyes clouded, and in an almost inaudible whisper, he confessed, "Because you made me remember someone I couldn't protect. And this time, I don't want to stay seated." That phrase hung between them. It wasn't an attempt to move her. It was an open wound. Emma swallowed. Her instinct told her to run. Her soul told her to trust. She looked at the sky, then at the face of that strange man, and finally, at her son. His small hands peeked out from the blanket, as if asking for something she couldn't give him alone. One night she finally said, "Just one." Gabriel nodded with respect. He didn't smile, he didn't celebrate. He just opened the car door and waited. Emma stood up carefully. Her legs were shaking. She got into the car without looking back. The vehicle drove away slowly, while the church bells began to ring, as if marking not the end, but the beginning of something. The house was enormous, but silent. An automatic gate opened as the car passed, revealing a discreet property, without ostentatious luxuries. High walls, large windows, soft lights. It seemed more like a refuge than a mansion, and somehow that calmed her. When she got out of the car, Emma held her son tighter. The feeling of vulnerability was greater now, within four walls that didn't belong to her. But the air was warm, and for the first time in days, it didn't smell of humidity or abandonment. She smelled something she had almost forgotten: security. An older woman with a kind face and pulled back hair appeared at the entrance. "Mr. Morrison, everything all right?" she asked, without looking judgmentally at Emma. "Yes, Margaret. Can you prepare a room?" "Of course." Emma felt the urge to say no, that they shouldn't bother, that she just wanted the sofa, a corner, a nook. But she was exhausted, and so was her son. She climbed an elegant but simple staircase, with wrought iron railings. Margaret guided her patiently, without asking questions. She showed her a room with a large bed, clean blankets, an improvised crib with pillows, and a private bathroom. Everything smelled of lavender, of care. "Whatever you need is in the closet. Take whatever you want," Margaret said, with the voice of a borrowed mother. And she left, leaving the door ajar. Emma sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't cry, she didn't smile. She just stayed there, staring into space, listening to her son's soft breathing. She removed the wet blanket. She kissed his feet. She changed his diaper with trembling hands. And finally, she lay him down next to her. They both slept, not because the fear had gone away, but because their bodies couldn't take it anymore. In another room, Gabriel stayed in his study, in front of a lit fireplace. He had a glass of wine in his hand, but didn't taste it. He just watched the fire. He thought about his wife, about her gentle gaze, about how she would have reacted if the church scene had been real a few years ago. The memory hurt. Not the scandal, not the press, but what he didn't do in time, what he didn't see. And now, without understanding why, a young woman with a baby had taken him back to that abyss, but also to a new shore. At dawn, Emma woke up startled. The sun entered timidly through the curtains. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then she remembered. The rain, the man, the house. She got up. She looked for her clothes. She felt ashamed of how worn, how broken, how foreign everything seemed. At that moment, someone knocked on the door softly. "I made breakfast," said a male voice. "Whenever you want." She didn't respond, but the aroma of toasted bread and fresh coffee began to melt the defenses that remained. Breakfast was served on a long table, bathed in the soft morning light. Emma came down with uncertain steps, still dressed in the same clothes from the day before, damp at the edges, with her hair hastily pulled back. She didn't know where to place her hands or how to hold her gaze. Gabriel was sitting at the head of the table with a coffee cup in his hands. When he saw her, he immediately stood up and with a discreet gesture slid the chair in front of him backward. She hesitated, but she sat down. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked, without pressure. "Not much," she replied, "but more than in recent days." They ate in silence at first. The baby was awake, in Emma's arms, babbling soft sounds, as if trying to talk to the air. Gabriel watched him with unexpected attention. There was no judgment in his gaze, no pity either, just a kind of reverent curiosity, as if the little one had something to teach him. "May I?" Gabriel suddenly asked, with a low and respectful voice. "What? May I hold him?" Emma instinctively pressed the child against her chest. For a second, memories invaded her like a blow, hands that once promised to care, and then disappeared. But in Gabriel's eyes there was no threat. There was something else, a fragility he wasn't trying to hide. After a few seconds, she handed him over carefully, and then time stopped. Gabriel received the baby like someone taking something sacred in their hands. His movements were slow, clumsy, but full of a tenderness that didn't seem rehearsed. The child looked at him steadily and smiled. That simple gesture opened a crack inside Gabriel, a space that had been sealed for years. "I never had children," he said in a low voice. "I always thought it wasn't for me." "And now?" Emma asked, almost without thinking. Gabriel looked down at the child, who was playing with the buttons on his shirt. "No, I'm not so sure." The baby grabbed his finger with unexpected strength, and Gabriel smiled. For the first time in a long, long time, Emma watched him in silence. And inside her, something was beginning to change too, because it wasn't about money or promises. It was presence, the way that man held her son, without fear, without haste, with respect. And you who are listening to this story, if this moment touched something inside you, give it a like. Sometimes just one sincere gesture is enough to begin mending what has been broken for years. The child fell asleep in his arms. Emma extended her hands to take him back, but Gabriel gently shook his head. "Let him stay a little longer. It does me good." And in that instant, something invisible but very real began to be born between the two. The morning had begun with an almost unreal calm. The singing of birds floated in the garden. The sun caressed the treetops. And inside the house, the silence felt like an embrace. Gabriel and Emma walked along the stone path among the flowers. He spoke to her in a soft voice, telling her that this garden had once been his late wife's refuge. Emma listened, without interrupting, feeling that this story didn't belong to her, but wasn't foreign to her either, until the sound of an engine broke the harmony. A white, elegant car stopped in front of the house. The gate opened automatically, and instantly the emotional temperature dropped several degrees. From it stepped a woman of imposing presence, with a fitted dress and dark glasses, Victoria. She walked straight toward them, with steps that didn't hesitate. "Gabriel, what a surprise to find you so accompanied," she said, slowly removing her glasses. Emma felt a knot in her stomach, not because of Victoria, but because of the way Gabriel's past had entered, without asking permission. "What are you doing here?" he asked, not hiding his discomfort. "I just came to pick up some documents. But it seems I arrived just in time to see your new charity project." She looked Emma up and down without shame. Emma didn't respond. She had received looks like that before, too many. "Victoria, I'd ask you to leave if you only came to provoke," Gabriel said, containing his tone. "Oh, I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable." But do you really think this has a future? A girl with a baby that you pick up from the street. The same thing again. Emma pressed the child against her chest. The baby, as if sensing the tension, began to get restless. She's not the same thing, Gabriel replied, firmly. Victoria smiled with that elegant way that hides poison. Not everyone wants to be saved, Gabriel, and you keep looking for redemption where there's only need. She turned around and returned to the car, but before getting in, she threw out one last phrase. Be careful what you build on ruins. Sometimes it falls down again. The car door slam was like a dry shot, and the silence that remained hurt. Emma went up to the room without saying a word. She began to collect her things. She folded the baby's blanket. She put away the worn clothes. Her hands were shaking, but her decision wasn't. Gabriel went up after her. Are you leaving? Thank you for everything, she said without looking at him. But this isn't my place. Because of Victoria. Because of everything. Because of what was said, and what wasn't. I don't fit here, Gabriel. I don't belong to this world of silent houses and perfect gardens. I come from noise, from struggle, from mud. And what's wrong with that? That you are peace, and I am war. And my son doesn't deserve more wars. Gabriel took a step. What if this time you were the peace? Emma looked at him, with bright eyes, but she shook her head. I can't risk this being just an illusion. Thank you for the warm days, but it's time to return to the cold. She took her son, went down the stairs, and left through the same door that had once opened as hope. Gabriel didn't stop her, but inside, his heart was screaming what his lips didn't yet know how to say. The sky had changed. The clouds were covering the city again, with that soft melancholy that precedes important decisions. Emma walked with a firm step, though inside everything in her trembled. The baby slept on her chest, oblivious to the hurricane unleashing in his mother's soul. Every street she walked, every corner was a reminder of the loneliness she knew too well. She had done the right thing, right? But then, a horn sounded in the distance. Not loud, not impatient, just urgent. She didn't stop. She didn't want to look back again. But then she heard his voice. Not shouted, not desperate, just sincere. Emma, please. She turned, and she saw him. Gabriel, in an unbuttoned suit, without a car, running down the sidewalk as if his whole life depended on those steps. He stopped in front of her, breathless. He looked into her eyes, and said nothing. He just knelt. Yes, again. But not like that time under the rain. Now it wasn't redemption, it was surrender. I don't have pretty words, he finally said. I don't have perfect promises. I only have this, my truth, my decision. Emma looked at him, paralyzed. I don't care where you come from. I don't care about your past. I care about you. And that child, I can no longer imagine my house without his laughter. She closed her eyes. The wind blew between them. The city noises faded. I know you're afraid. I'm afraid too. But if you're going to leave, let it not be because I didn't try to stop you. Gabriel stood up slowly. He didn't come closer. He didn't try to touch her. He just looked at her and said the only thing that could change everything. I don't choose you as a debt. I choose you as destiny. Emma felt something inside her break free. The tears she had learned to contain began to fall, one after another, without permission. What if I don't know how to start? She whispered. Then we learn together. She looked down. The baby began to move, restless, as if he too was asking for an answer. Emma took a step, and then another. She approached Gabriel. They were face to face, two disarmed souls, two open wounds, two willing hearts. All right, she finally said. But this time we walk at the same pace. Gabriel nodded, and with a trembling hand, he touched hers. There was no audience, there were no applause, just two people choosing each other. Finally, a few weeks passed, enough for the season to change, enough for them to change too. The house was no longer so silent. Emma's footsteps could be heard in the kitchen in the mornings. The baby's soft laughter filtered through the hallways, and in the garden, the sun seemed to stay a little longer. Gabriel had learned to prepare coffee with the exact amount of sugar she liked. Emma had discovered she could sleep without fear, without starts. And the baby was beginning to say his first syllables, and each one was a seed of hope. One day, returning from the doctor, Emma arrived at the house entrance with her son in her arms. The gate was closed, as always, but this time something was different. Gabriel was waiting for her there, standing on the other side, with a flower in his hand, not an elegant rose, but a wild flower, one that had grown alone, behind the wall. "What's this?" she asked, smiling. "It's for you, for all the days when you thought no one would see you." She looked at him, and finally understood. She wasn't alone, not anymore. The gate opened with a slight hum, and she took a step forward. "Welcome home," he said. Emma entered. Her feet touched the warm stone of the path. The baby stretched his arms toward Gabriel, who picked him up naturally. And in that gesture, everything fit. There was no background music, no fireworks, just the sound of the heart, when it finally rests. Sometimes life expels you from the places where you sought comfort, only to lead you to the home that was really waiting for you. Because love, real love, doesn't begin with promises. It begins with a simple act, choosing to stay. And if this story touched something deep inside you, if you ever felt like you didn't belong, that no one saw you, subscribe to the channel. Here, every story is a refuge, and you too deserve to find yours. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next story. Until then, don't stop believing.